We visited the Dayton Aviation National Historical Park in Dayton, Ohio during the summer of 2018. If you would like to get notices when I post again, be sure to subscribe right here. Just click on that button. This was established as a National Historical Site on October the 16th, 1992. The first site that we'll go to has the Wright Brothers Cycle Company and the Aviation Trail Visitor Center and Museum, and we'll look at that for a while. Now we're going to move over to the Wright Brothers National Museum. Here we'll be able to actually look at one of the original Wright Brother flyers. Our next stop will be the Huffman Prairie Flying Field. They actually flew here after flying at Kitty Hawk. Soon we're arriving in Dayton, Ohio, and we will head downtown to the Dayton Aviation Heritage National Historical Park. You'll notice the brick roads around the park. We'll be seeing many things while we're here. First stop will be the Visitor Center. Then we'll go to the Wright Cycle Shop. We'll go to Hawthorn Hall and go to the Huffman Prairie Field Interpretive Center and the field itself. Let's get started. First off, the Visitor Center. Here they have a replica of an old-time grocery store where you came in and told them what you wanted and then they went and got it rather than you pushing a shopping cart around. In the lobby is a replica of one of their gliders. They used gliders before they had powered flight to learn the principles of flight. The two brothers were almost inseparable. They started their own printing business and never really married. Their first business was printing, and they never really gave that up. They had a printing shop above all of their cycle shops. And here's a picture of their printing presses. Her mother was Susan Corner, and her father was a bishop in the Methodist Church, Milton Wright. And here's a picture of the boys. Wilbur was the older one by 3 years. And this is their fourth bicycle shop. Upstairs was their printing press. This is the one where they started thinking about flight. The fifth one is where they started experimenting, and we'll look at that, a model of that later. This is the only picture of this cycle shop. Bicycling was becoming very popular in the United States at this time, and they thought, hey, we know how to do mechanics. Why can't we build bicycles for them also? And so they started their shop with their showroom in the front. Here are some of their prices at that time. In 1895, $100 for a bicycle. And their shop was in the back where they manufactured them from scrap. And now it's time to leave this area. But as we leave, if you'll notice on the left-hand side of the street in front of us is a red car. This is in front of a replica of the house that they lived in when they were in Dayton, Ohio. I have to have a replica because Henry Ford bought the house, had it torn down, moved it to Dearborn, Michigan, and had it reconstructed in his place, which we'll look at later, the original house. And now we go to the Wright Brothers National Museum here, where we will look at the various things about the Wrights. This is a replica of the fifth shop that they own. This is where they started experimenting with flight. In the front was a sales area again, and then in the back a workshop for building and repairing bicycles, which was still their main function. They built each one of the parts by hand, so it was a labor-intensive thing. And if you notice, the belts were driven by this motor, and all of them were belt-driven. This is an actual bicycle they built from 1901. But they also, during the off-season, started experimenting with flight and built a wind tunnel to experiment with various configurations of wind. They went to Kitty Hawk because of the wind and sand and practiced with gliders for 3 years before they ever started thinking about powered flight. And now we're heading into Wright Hall, built by Orville Wright. This is the 1905 original Wright Flyer. This is one of their earliest powered aircraft. And yes, it's not a replica, it's original. Notice a few things about it. They had to build a small engine for it. It's covered by fabric. But if you'll notice, there is no metal listed anywhere here. It's all made out of wood, but they painted it silver because they wanted their competition to think they were using metal. They knew that even aluminum would be too heavy to fly. Note also the elevator that they used to go up and down in, and the hip cradle that they used for controlling the rudder and wing warp for direction. How did this work? Well, here's a little model that shows. Seems rather awkward to me. They designed their own engine from scratch with the first aluminum block anywhere. And here's a historical area in the back with many historical things that came from the Wright brothers. And here is their original pattern. They flew many demonstrations along the way, and the first flying boat. In 1909, they attached the canoe since they were over water, afraid it might need it to float. That original canoe is still here in the museum today. This is a picture of the Wright brothers assembling an airplane and the steering wheel from that airplane. Orville and Amelia met in 1929. It is amazing how things have moved. In 1905, this was the most technologically advanced flying machine around. 64 years later, we landed on the moon. 64. And now it's time to head to Hawthorn Hall. Orville and Wilbur were building this hall in order for them to live in it. But Orville died about a year before it was finished. And so what they did was their sister actually moved in when it was finished in 1914, and this is where she and her family lived. Now we head out to Huffman Prairie Flying Field. They were at Kitty Hawk because they needed the wind for gliders, but now they decided they needed to go someplace where they could actually take off from flat land without wind, by motor power, to have a really useful airplane. So they came to the Huffman Prairie area and used the cow pasture. This is the interpretive center that we're at right now. Here we will look at several things. The interpretive center here. Across the road is a dam that was built to keep the area of the field from flooding. And then we'll go to the field itself where they actually flew off of. This is the flood control dam that was built back then, and this is the monument for the brothers. The leaves are starting to change color, and now we go to the interpretive center. This is their demonstration team in 1910, and the first person to die of an airplane crash was Ralph Johnston. Not a very good way to be made into history. And now we head to the field itself. It's kind of hard to get to and find. They moved out here after Kitty Hawk in about 1904 and started perfecting their flying with an engine from this flat field. It was really a cow pasture to begin with. The white flags were set up on the corners to see what the wind was doing, and they tried to actually fly when there was no wind so they could prove that their airplane could do that. Part of this area has now become a tall grass prairie preserve left in its natural state. But this is the field where they actually flew, taking off and landing here on numerous occasions. Here you can find the launching frame. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. And a replica of their hangar. At first they weren't able to take off from a dead stop, so they built this A-frame, pulled the weight to the top, attached the string to the front of the airplane, and then shot it down the track, thus the first catapult. And this is a replica of their hangar. By 1910, they were so confident they started training a flight school here, and many of the first pilots in the nation learned how to fly here. And this brings us to the end of this video.